Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee. Everything School HQ. It is Wednesday night, so you know what that means. Take Graphs, everybody's favorite Major League Baseball podcast, each and every week on this very feed. Up there in
New York City.
Kind of New York City. He's in Worcester sauce, New York.
Westchester sauce.
Westchester
shirt sauce.
Have you ever had Westchester sauce, Jon Tayler?
Yeah, I used some in a marinade I made the other day. It's great.
I don't think I've ever had it. I don't think I've ever actually opened it and poured it in there. I know it's in every single human being's refrigerator, regardless of whether or not they use it.
You are legally required when you buy a refrigerator to put a bottle of Worcestershire sauce and a box of Arm & Hammer baking soda in there.
Yeah, I don't. I will say I don't think I've ever had Arm & Hammer baking soda, and you also want to keep that away from other humans. I've heard that's one you don't want around other alive human beings. Jon Tayler.
That's fair. That's fair.
Jon Tayler. Major League Baseball, yes. The hot stove. Last week this whole week is just insane. The week in between Christmas and New Year's, just time is a flat circle. I don't understand what day it is. I don't understand what all we're doing. But we talked about Ohtani. Yamamoto signed since our last recording that we'll get into in a little bit, Jon Tayler. But winter meetings really much settled down. I think we're going to have a lot of bullpen action in the coming weeks, it seems like, if you follow the tea leaves here. But Jon Tayler, your take graphs, take of the week for December 27th is what, sir?
Is anyone going to beat the Dodgers this year? Because they have certainly apparently decided that they are not losing. Granted, it feels really easy to say. I mean, and we get this every offseason, right? Somebody's got to win the winter, and I think barring something crazy happening between now and the start of spring training, the Dodgers have pretty well won the winter. They got the big prize in Ohtani. They got the second biggest prize in Yoshinobu Yamamoto. They also added Tyler Glasnow. They may not be done making moves. It's kind of hard to imagine how much more they can do at this point, but they very easily could keep adding if they want to keep adding. Money is very clearly not an object for this team, but it's really. So it's really kind of striking, like how good this roster is, and not just how good this roster is for 2024, but also for beyond. And this is something I think we'll get into in talking more about Yamamoto. But the basic setup now is between Ohtani and Yamamoto, both of whom are under 30 and significantly so under 30. Shohei Ohtani, I believe, just turned 29 back in July, so he's not significantly under 30, but he's still under 30. And Yoshinobu Yamamoto just turned 25 in August. They have now set themselves up for the next decade with those two men leading the way for whatever comes next, transitioning the team from the current existing Clayton Kershaw, Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts kind of core to whatever comes next after that. We've already seen, we've seen this with the Dodgers already, they're already beginning to have shed some of the pieces of what they were. You saw that with Justin Turner leaving. You have seen that Kershaw is still there, but he's not going to pitch till midseason, and it's pretty clear that this, one way or another, we are reaching the end with Clayton Kershaw. Julio Urias is gone, Trevor Bauer is gone, although both for particularly sordid reasons. Kenley Jansen is gone. This is very much a team in transition away from that set core that made them so successful in the past. And what they've done is just reorient and say, okay, well, now we're just going to build around Ohtani and Yamamoto. We've got the best hitter in the major leagues. We've got a guy who's projected to be one of the 10 best pitchers in the major leagues. Also a guy in Glasnow who just to complete the under 30 trifecta, but Glasnow just turned 30 this year. So I think this will be his age 30 season, but regardless, they are moving forward with that trio very clearly as their set future, to say nothing of the guys they already have in place. Will Smith, Bobby Miller, ideally Gavin Lux. There is a real. The Dodgers, in that sense, are just building themselves up as a perpetual inevitability. You know what I mean? Like this is the team, or this is the team that is just always going to be competitive. It's always, at least with this ownership and this front office structure, is always going to be competitive, is always going to be in the picture, it's always going to be there, making life harder for everyone else. This is a team that are not going away. Again, they just reoriented themselves, around this new group. And because the other thing too is you look at this existing Dodgers roster as is. A lot of those core pieces are over 30. Betts is 31. Freeman is 34. Max Muncy is 33. Most of that bullpen is in it, or a good chunk of that bullpen is in its 30s. Walker Buehler is the other younger player I forgot to mention, because in large part because he just wasn't around last year because of Tommy John. Similarly with Dustin May, when he comes back from Tommy John, I think also is part of that group. James Outman, another important under 30 guy. Miguel Vargas, ideally. Emmett Sheehan, Gavin Stone. To say nothing of what's cooking down in the minors for them, which is perpetually great. It's kind of unprecedented what the Dodgers are doing and can do to be in this place of not just consistent contention, but consistent future contention, where, again, this is a team that is going to be good for the foreseeable future. So long as Ohtani and Yamamoto are healthy and productive, there's no reason this team won't be good. And they've demonstrated, too, this offseason that whatever they will spend, whatever resources it takes, be it money or prospects or both, to ensure this window never, ever closes for them. And I think that, for me, is what makes it so kind of frightening to consider, like, maybe you beat the Dodgers this year. You never know. I don't think any of us saw the Texas Rangers winning the World Series in 2023, and yet here we are. But at the same time, maybe better said, instead of can anyone beat the Dodgers, is can anyone outlast them? Because what they've done is given themselves not just the best odds this year, but the best odds going forward. That at some point, the roulette wheel that is baseball will stop spinning and land on them because they have put bets on the most numbers. Is it clear that I don't actually know how roulette functions and have never played it before?
I don't think
as far as I understand it, you bet on the numbers, and then if the ball falls in the little number hole, you win money. But I don't know if you can bet on more than one number at the same time. Can you spread your chips out? Either way, the Dodgers set themselves up for the foreseeable future, forever. It's the Dodgers stomping on the league forever in a way that I don't really think baseball has seen since arguably the golden days of the dynasty Yankees back in the 40s and 50s. Where when there were so many, when the game was so completely different, it was so much easier, in a sense, to build a team that just stayed together forever. You never had to worry about free agency. You never had to worry about, spending limits. It was just whatever you could construct. The Dodgers have figured it out. They have figured out a way to be a perpetual contention machine.
They have, John, but it's one of those things where people are really freaking out about, the Dodgers are inevitable. But it's like Glasnow very easily could not be around on their postseason roster. We'll see what Ohtani's like.
Well, I should note, and that's the thing, like, there's so much, and I think when I mentioned roulette, part of it is because there's so much chance in a given season. Guys get hurt, guys underperform, weird stuff happens. Your starting shortstop might, turns out, be a guy who tries to date 14-year-olds all the time, and that might just sink your title hopes. Weird things happen in the sport of baseball. But what the Dodgers have done, I think, is set themselves up to not just to weather that better than anybody, but to tilt the table and tilt the odds as much in their favor as possible by adding the guys who project to be the most productive for the next decade. Again, Shohei Ohtani is the best hitter in baseball, and he probably will be for the rest of his career, or at the very least for the next minimum 5 years. Yoshinobu Yamamoto, if the projections are right, will be one of the 10 best pitchers in baseball for the next at least 5 years and maybe longer than that. By signing those two guys, they again have moved the odds in their favor, and even if it's just by a small amount, it's still something. Again, we don't have that's going to take a little bit to get used to. Fangraphs doesn't have playoff odds for 2024 yet. Obviously, those aren't going to be ready for quite some time. But it will not. I don't think it'd be a surprise to anyone, depending what happens between here in the beginning and that time, that the Dodgers are probably going to open the 2024 season as the odds-on World Series favorite. And not just at Fangraphs. I would imagine with every single projection system that exists, to say nothing of among in Vegas and among casual fans, among hardcore fans, among prognosticators, analysts, they have set themselves up to be the favorite. If things break in the wrong direction, so be it. That happens. That would have happened with or without Ohtani, with or without Yamamoto. By adding them, they make the odds that much better that even if things do break bad for them, they still have what it takes to survive, to advance, and ideally to come out of it with a championship.
Well, we haven't talked about what Yamamoto means for this rotation, because we talk about the rotation. We'll see what Kershaw does. We'll see how Buehler bounces back. We'll see what Ohtani looks like over the next couple of years. If we don't know if he'll ever rejoin the rotation. Like we'll see how he heals and what it looks like for Shohei in 2025 in that regard. But when you look at this rotation, John, what does Yamamoto bring, and what does this rotation look like to you? Is this still a weakness? Because we talked about it over the offseason here when we first got started, that the Dodgers rotation still was kind of shaky, and it was going to be interesting to see what they did to shore that up, because it was a real problem for them this season with their depth. So do you think they're okay now for sure, or do you still think that there is some volatility even with Yamamoto on board?
No, I think they're in a very strong position. I think so much of that is Yamamoto. I mean, who knows what exactly the adjustment for him will be coming from Japan to the United States, and all the various adjustments that have to be made by Japanese players coming to the United States, both on the field and off. But from everything we've seen, everything we've been told, everything that we've read, everything that the projections have said, this is a guy you should expect will be making an ace level impact right off the bat, right from the get go. Both. To that, you can add Glasnow, who I'm with you. I don't really expect him to throw more than like 130 innings. I think that's a fool's gambit to expect anything more than that out of Tyler Glasnow. But what's worth noting with Glasnow is, for as much as I don't love, in particular, I don't love the extension for him, because I think that's it's betting very heavily that either the Dodgers can figure out a way to keep him healthy long term, which I don't know that any team really has that ability, or that there's somehow another level yet for him to reach, which I also find a little hard to believe, although maybe there's something there with better pitch efficiency, better control. Who knows? We'll see. Regardless, even if he only gives the Dodgers 130 innings next year, that's 130 elite innings. It's 130 innings at probably like a 125 ERA plus or better, which is obviously much better than giving 130 innings to a collection of guys like, Nick Frasso or Kyle Hurt, or, I mean, let's look at it this way here. Because the Dodgers rotation last year was kind of a shit show all the way around. Here are some guys who had to start games for the Los Angeles Dodgers at some point in time. No, Noah Syndergaard, they gave 12 starts and 55 innings to Noah Syndergaard. He had an ERA plus of 61. They gave 69 innings to Michael Grove, who had an ERA plus of 71. 103 innings to Tony Gonsolin, who had an ERA plus of 87 before he blew out his elbow. 64 innings to Lance Lynn with a league average ERA plus of 100. 60 innings to Emmett Sheehan for an ERA plus of 89. Other guys who made starts: Ryan Yarborough, Victor Gonzalez, Gavin Stone. Some of these are young guys where I think you will expect them. I mean, they're obviously going to count on guys like Sheehan and Grove and Stone to be a big part of their rotation both this year and going forward. And that also includes, I shouldn't crap on the likes of Nick Frasso and Landon Knack. They will be useful for them, but not having to pencil those guys into the rotation right away, allowing them time to develop if need be in AAA, to work out the kinks, to be called upon only in an emergency and not have to hand them the ball every 5 days, which is something they had to keep doing with Stone and Sheehan and Pepio and Grove last year, and it just did not work out. Similarly, they're going to get Walker Buehler back at some point, coming back from Tommy John rehab. Obviously, the immediate return from Tommy John is never perfect, never easy. But Buehler was an elite pitcher before, and assuming that he still has the same stuff he has, there's no reason to expect any different. Bobby Miller is now the fourth starter in this rotation, and Bobby Miller was by ERA plus the second best starter on the Dodgers last year at 116. Now he's number 4 in that pecking order. Number 5, you've got Emmett Sheehan. And again, this doesn't take into account that they're going to get Kershaw back at some point over the course of the season. Unfortunately, I don't think there's any likelihood that Gonsolin and May are back ready. Those seem like more 2025 bets. But I think at the very least, you add Yamamoto, you add Glasnow, you have given yourself ideally 350 or so innings minimum. I think the Dodgers would bank on, of what should be incredibly above average pitching. Add to that whatever Buehler gives you, which I imagine will probably be something in the 150 range. That is 500 innings from 3 of the 25 to 30 best starters in baseball that they just simply didn't have last year. That they had to give, again, to a combination of Gonsolin, Grove, Syndergaard, Lynn, Sheehan, Pepio, Stone, guys who just either were not ready for prime time or left prime time behind a long time ago. So, look, I wouldn't be surprised if the Dodgers do add, and I guess it depends to a certain degree who's still available, and just checking out the leftover free agents in the starting pitching market. I don't see them being in on a guy like Blake Snell or Jordan Montgomery at this point, given how much money they dropped on Ohtani and Yamamoto. But, in particular, maybe someone on the lower end of things like, a Mike Clevenger, a Michael Lorenzen, someone maybe in that stretch, a kind of a Sean Manaea, a James Paxton, a Lucas Giolito. I think there's still a possibility of getting a guy like that to add, even more innings and more depth to that group, so that you don't necessarily have to go into opening day with Emmett Sheehan as your number 5 starter. But that's also not a bad thing. Emmett Sheehan was a very good prospect. That's a really nice piece to have at the end of your rotation. So no, I think the Dodgers rotation is a real strength for them right now. I think it was that, and adding, I think, one more dynamic bat to their lineup was really what they had to do this offseason. And they accomplished both those goals in arguably the best possible way they could.
I like it. Something else that you're not gonna like, Jon Tayler. Lucas Giolito. Does he make sense? You mentioned him here for this Red Sox, or for this Dodgers rotation on the back end here. Link to the Red Sox. Does Lucas Giolito make sense to you?
Yes, I mean, why not? For starters, he's alive, so that's a big plus.
Mm-hmm.
Look, the Red Sox need all the help they can get in the rotation. In the same way I just gave you the Dodgers rotation depth chart, let me give you the Red Sox current rotation depth chart, and you just stop me when I get to a player or point where you just immediately start to feel anxiety. Chris Sale.
Mm.
You could probably have stopped me right there, but I'll keep going. Nick Pivetta.
I feel bad for Chris Sale.
I really feel bad for Chris Sale, but anyway.
Yeah.
Chris Sale.
Skinny,
Nick
tall
Pivetta.
kings. I just identify a lot with Chris Sale. As a lefty, skinny, tallish man, I was just, it will always.
You fellow Southpaw blades of grass must stick together.
Pale skin, not happy to be out in public. Yeah,
Yeah, just constantly enraged with everything around him.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't think COVID is a real thing.
Well, that's not me. Was that a Sale guy? Was that a Sale thing? I don't remember.
I shouldn't be saying this. I don't know for sure, but would you be surprised if you learned that Chris Sale is a COVID denier?
I mean, we can go down a whole rabbit hole here on baseball players.
I mean, would you be surprised if any MLB player named were a COVID denier? Let's just leave it at that. But yeah, that rotation right now: Chris Sale, Nick Pivetta, Brian Bayo, Cutter Crawford, Tanner Houck. That is, I don't think it's a stretch to say that is one of the 5 worst rotations in baseball right now.
It's not great.
That is an awful group. That is an awful starting 5. Worse, there's no depth behind that. Assuming that the Red Sox are now actually serious for real about keeping Garrett Whitlock in the bullpen, and I think at this point it looks pretty clear that, I don't know that you can trust him as a starter. It just does not seem to work for whatever reason. Your depth starters are Brandon Walter and Chris Murphy, both of whom got blasted to hell and back when they made appearances for the team last year. Cooper Criswell, who they signed away from the Rays for all of $1 million, and that's pretty much it. There is no starting pitching depth on this roster in this system. The 4+ years of Chaim Bloom in charge netted virtually nothing in terms of pitching. So regardless of what Giolito did last year, and for the record, what Giolito did last year was be pretty bad for the most part. He was great in Chicago, or very good in Chicago. He was terrible with the Angels. He was even worse with the Guardians. I'm willing to give him a mulligan on those last 2 because that was just a really weird way for the season to go. And those are 2. The Angels, God help them, who knows what they're up to. The Guardians, by that point, were pretty clearly just playing out the string. But if nothing else, Giolito gives them innings, which I think is a very, very important thing that they need, because of those 5 guys I mentioned, Sale, Pivetta, Bayo, Crawford, and Houck, the high in innings last year from any of those guys was Bayo's 157. I don't think you can count on Sale for more than 120 innings at this point in time. Nick Pivetta should be in the bullpen, not in the rotation at this point, because if he's in the rotation, he's a purely league average arm. He can get you some outs, but that's pretty much about it. Crawford, Houck, again, both guys I don't really think you're going to be comfortable asking for more than 140 innings. Giolito, on the other hand, when he's healthy, is 175 innings like clockwork. So regardless of what the Red Sox think they can get out of Giolito, and I have to imagine that if they're interested in him, they think that there is some ability to recover the Cy Young caliber form he showed in 2019 and 2020 and 2011 with the White Sox. There has to be, at the very least, he gives them league average or better innings, which is something that they both do not have at the moment and do not have projected anywhere else on their roster within their farm system. So I think it makes a lot of sense, especially when you consider the reputation or that Craig Breslow developed with the Cubs as being kind of a pitching, being more pitching forward, kind of a pitching guru. And also on top of everything else, because Giolito's season again, he was very good with the White Sox and then bad down the stretch with the Angels and Guardians. It's fair to say that Giolito is probably going to come at a relative discount. I mean, he's also, despite, and this is also an important thing too. He's only 28 years old, or sorry, 29 years old. He won't turn 30 until July. This is not a Kyle Gibson type, 34, 35-year-old kind of sore veteran arm where you're like, we just need outs. There is still real upside to Lucas Giolito. And I think it's upside that can be had at a more reasonable price than, say, splashing, 100 million plus on Jordan Montgomery to give you slightly better results than that. So I think it makes a lot of sense from the Red Sox perspective. What I'm curious to see is how many other teams are interested, particularly teams like, say, Tampa or the Dodgers or Houston that have that reputation for being pitcher fixer-uppers and that might be able to score a nice little discount here on a guy that I think is probably came into the offseason as a pretty underrated asset.
The Red Sox are going to be so fascinating when we get into our previews going into next year. Are you ready for this joke, John? I'll see you in the new year, Jon Tayler. I'll see you next year. I'll talk to you next year. Do you get it?
I mean, yeah, you literally will. I kind of just want to see how long you were going to try to sell that.
Like Jon Tayler, I won't see you again until 2024. I won't see you again until next year, the next calendar year. Is that not crazy?
I really want to see how long you're going to keep this going. Is it going to be the rest of the pod? Is just you saying, just increasing, like, it'll be a whole other year the next time we speak to each other. A whole different year. We never
just like the Epstein bit from Conan, the Conan interview.
Yeah.
Did you hear Jeff?
Look, I'll give you a preview of my Red Sox preview. They're a last place team.
Are we sure?
Flat out. Yeah.
I don't think we're sure, John. The AL East is going to be weird, man.
Well, I just don't see how
who had the Orioles winning.
I don't see how this is a better team on paper than any of the other. The only team I think you might be able to make an argument for, especially given that they just did something like give Isaiah Kiner-Falefa a 2-year deal for reasons I can't begin to fathom, is that maybe there's a real dip coming for the Blue Jays. If nothing else, the vibes-based hit they took on Ohtani just swerving them hardcore. I don't know, but we'll see. But a lot of it is, again, this rotation, which is, again, a bottom 5 unit in the majors right now. And that's the other thing. They need way more than Lucas Giolito in terms of help here.
Yeah.
I don't know if it makes sense for them to be in on a Blake Snell type, but the other options, there's not really a lot left at this point. Most of the mid-tier rotation options have signed, with the exception of Marcus Stroman, who would be the worst culture fit in Boston imaginable, or back of the rotation guys like Michael Lorenzen or Sean Manaea, or you're taking shots on guys like James Paxton or Lucas Giolito or Matthew Boyd, where the plus stuff is still there, but you're just not sure how often it's actually going to be there between potential injuries or just the inconsistency that kind of marks those guys. To say nothing, again, like Paxton is 35, Boyd is 33. These are not durable guys you're going to be able to count on for 180 innings or whatnot, nor are they guys you're going to be able to make a long-term part of your rotation. Those are one-year patch jobs. So it kind of, and I understand ultimately that, Yamamoto was never going to sign, I think ultimately never going to sign with anyone but the Dodgers, especially once Ohtani picked Los Angeles. I don't think it was ever realistic to expect that the Red Sox were going to be in on Yamamoto to any real degree. But that is exactly the kind of pitcher this team needed, is a significantly under 30 ace-type starter, because there is no one approaching that level in their farm system right now, barring a huge breakout from an unexpected source.
Yeah. Go Red Sox.
It's a fun time to be a Boston Red Sox fan, which I guess this is just a karmic penance for like 4 World Series championships in a 15-year stretch. Like,
yeah, it's pretty good.
It's fine. I can still live on those. I'll eat out on those forever.
Well, you're in a similar boat to a team, not to the same dire extent. And like Grant Brisbee has a great perspective on it. He's funny. And I think San Francisco Giants Twitter is pretty funny about it, because in a lot of my favorite writers and analysts, because San Francisco's got a lot of great folks who are covering the team and write about the team, and that I very much enjoy. But also bring back Hunter Pence. He was great on podcasting. Bring back Hunter Pence, man. He was good. When you find a good ex-athlete who's good on podcasts, just hey, keep him around. But Jon Tayler, that's a long way of me getting to the Giants stick poke. We did the Rockies last week, Jon Tayler. It's time to do the stick poke this week with their offseason. They're not the same extent of what happened with the Red Sox, but they obviously the even season titles and everything's been pretty good for the Giants in the 21st century by and large. Like it's been a pretty good last 20 years if you're a San Francisco Giants fan. However, they have been kicked in the groin here the last couple of years in a really, really rough way that I'm starting to actually feel a little bad about them. So stick poke segment this week. What could the Giants do this winter? How would you approach it if you were the GM of the Giants? And how much of it is just like, look, they tried really hard. They're going after the right guys. They're trying to beef things up, but they can't force people to sign with the San Francisco Giants. Like, I don't know. What say you, Jon Tayler?
And that I think is kind of the problem is I think the Giants and the Red Sox occupy that same tier of, they can make all the efforts and make all the overtures they want, but at the end of the day, they're not the Dodgers. They're not the Astros. They're not the Yankees, at least on or maybe on a legacy level. And I think it's really telling that, last year Aaron Judge, this year Yoshinobu Yamamoto, and to a certain degree also Shohei Ohtani. Although I don't get the sense Ohtani was ever really an option for the Giants. And I know they said we could have offered him the same deal, but well, you didn't. So at the end of the day, that's what counts.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really telling for all of those because those are like you said, those are the right guys to be going after. Judge, Ohtani, Yamamoto, the guys they're targeting are the right choices. But I think what's probably happening here beyond whatever, and this is where I just want to make a clear point. I don't think whatever's going on with the city of San Francisco, which is to say the constant clamor that San Francisco is so dangerous and gross now because there are homeless people. I don't think that matters one iota to anything other than the most like MAGA pilled Trump hat like MLB players, which that is not an insignificant number of guys. But I also don't think those guys were ever going to consider a city like San Francisco in the first place anyway. I really don't think the homeless population of San Francisco matters even one tiny bit to a guy like Aaron Judge or Shohei Ohtani. I think what's more likely here is that those guys are looking at this roster, looking at this farm system and going, oh, I'm going to have to do this all by myself, huh? Because that's really what this amounts to. Dan Szymborski's Zips, he did the Giants a couple weeks ago. He noted that this is an overall pretty solid roster, but it is really, really lacking in any kind of, I think, what we would call like not what we would call, but what you could call star power in a sense. And by that, he meant pretty much any guy who projects to be 3 WAR or better. I'll pull up the actual Zips because when Dan does his Zips projections, there's always a neat little graphic that shows you the projected WAR at each position. Looking at what the Giants have, they have exactly one single player projected to be above three wins above replacement next year, and that's Logan Webb at 4.6. He is a legitimate ace, a fantastic pitcher, the best part about this Giants team. There are 2 positions around the diamond in which the Giants are projected to be 3 wins or better. One is center field, where the newly signed Jung-Ho Lee will be a big part of what they're doing. The second is a catcher with Patrick Bailey, and most of that projection for Bailey is defensive. He is not much of a hitter, at least not so far, but he's a very good defender, which is obviously worth something, but at the same time, that's not going to do much in terms of the run score. Everywhere else, this team is projected to be somewhere in the 1 to 2.5 win range at every position. That's fine if all you care about is being an 80 to 82 win team and we're making it work from there. But that your ceiling is so low with that particular roster setup. And I don't necessarily think that that's what the Giants intended. But on the other hand, when your perpetual free agent choices are guys like Michael Conforto or Mitch Haniger or I won't say Lee because obviously we haven't seen him do, but Anthony DeSclafani or Ross Stripling or, Alex Cobb, like you're not aiming for ceiling. You're aiming for just some level of cheap, dependable floor. And I think if you want to, and I think that I think the Red Sox and Giants are similar in that way that their ownership has very clearly said, we are not breaking the bank anymore. You can have all the money you want in terms of being able to sign guys to fill positions, so long as you're not signing them to long-term big deals that are going to make us pay a lot of money. And I think that's just the reality is that any kind of stick poke for the Giants begins with, well, ownership has got to figure out or has got to realize that you cannot consistently contend or win like this. You are setting yourself up for 500 seasons with low ceilings, which again, does not neither moves a needle for on a roster level or in a contention level, but it also turns off your fan base. And I think this is a really big thing we've seen with the Giants over the last 5 or so years since their last, or I guess it's been longer than that since their last World Series win. But in particular, over the last, I think, 5 to 6 years, that fan base is starting to turn off. They're starting to tune out the Giants. They don't really care as much anymore. Some of this, I think, it coincides with the Warriors in that same period going full God mode, and the fact that the 49ers are once again good. But this is a fan base that should always be there. This is one of the most dedicated, hardcore fan bases in the sport of baseball. But the vibe you get is that a lot of Giants fans have pretty much tuned out and said, look, this team's never going to try. Their own, even when they do try, they never win. Because again, a guy like Aaron Judge or Shohei Ohtani looks at this roster and goes, oh, they're not winning crap. Even with me on that roster, they're not doing anything. Because it has to be more than one guy. As we've seen and as we've talked about a million times, you can't win with just one dude with one superstar on a baseball team. You need more than that. And some of that you can lay at the feet of ownership, not willing to spend on a bigger level. Some of that you can lay at the feet of a farm system that went through a real fallow period. And I think some of that you can lay at the feet of a front office, not necessarily Farhan Zaidi, although I'm not particularly impressed with his tenure so far, but also the last days of the front office before him, not really recognizing the urgency of, hey, this World Series winning core can't get younger. It is only ever going to get older. We have to have in place some level of plan for what the future looks like. That and look, it's not like I would expect after the very last out of the 2014 World Series that everyone in that front office is going to turn to each other and go, we need to get younger now, because they had 27-year-old Buster Posey, 26-year-old Brandon Belt, 27-year-old Brandon Crawford, 27-year-old Pablo Sandoval, 24-year-old Madison Bumgarner. This was not an old team necessarily by a big stretch, but they let that group hang on for so long and never really seemed to have any kind of contingency plan for, okay, but what happens when they get old? Like, what happens when these guys start to fall apart? What happens if one of these guys say, oh, I don't know, just happens to decide that he wants to spend more time with his family and maybe just doesn't really feel like playing all that much anymore? Granted, that was another 7 years for Buster Posey, but still, I think a lot of the seeds of what happened to the Giants, or a lot of the seeds of the Giants' downfall, were planted in that post-2014 moment where that team really did not capitalize on what it had. I mean, you look at, what did the 2014 Giants do after winning the World Series? Who was their big free agent signing? And I'm looking it up right now. It's not a gotcha thing, but what was their big move? They traded for Casey McGahee. They re-signed Sergio Romo. They added a very cooked Jake Peavy. They signed Nori Aoki. They signed Ryan Vogelsong. They did nothing that offseason. And I can understand, again, to a certain degree, that core was set and in a good place. The only major free agent loss that they had off of that group was, I was going to say Barry Zito, but I can't even sell that joke. There was no one coming off that roster, I think, where they had to feel like we must replace this guy. But at the same time, right there, you can already see the unwillingness to build on what they just accomplished by saying, we know we were good last year. Let's make ourselves even better. Especially when you consider that 2014 Giants team, they only won 88 games. They were a second place team. They were a wild card team, which is to take nothing away from what they did. But that wasn't like a 100-win Dodgers team losing the World Series and going, well, of course we're going to run it back. We won 100 games last year. We've got stars everywhere. That was an 88-win team carried by one of the single greatest postseason pitching performances we've ever seen in our lifetimes, and probably the kind we'll never see again, going, yeah, no, it's fine. We don't feel like trying anymore. And I think that's really what the issue is. But I mean, I'm going like a decade now into the past. In terms of what the current Giants can do, you look at where their issues are, I think, and it's funny because they have so many outfielders, but none of them really project to be anything other than kind of average. I don't really know what solution there is there. Bellinger doesn't really make sense. Cody Bellinger, that is, doesn't really make sense because they've got center field set up now with Lee, where sticking Bellinger in a corner doesn't really work very well for them. There's nothing really left in free agency for them to add. I think at this point you're probably trying to land some kind of starter in a trade. And I wonder, and this is where I come again to the Blue Jays being a really weird team that just seems to be stuck in some kind of monster hangover. If it's something like asking the Blue Jays, well, what do you want for Bo Bichette? What does the starting price for a guy like that look like? And who knows? I think that's where the Giants have to go at this point is to make the choice not just to go get the star player, but then also splash out the cash to make sure they stay. Because a guy like Bichette, it's not enough to get him. You then have got to give him the long term deal. But I think if you're the Giants for 2024, you've probably got to start there. You've got to find some way to add an impact bat. It probably has to be in a trade. Bichette is just one name to throw out there. I would consider also whatever options might exist at third base. Not really. And I'm open to suggestions here. I mean, I don't know that Matt Chapman moves a needle enough for them to add at third base, but
he
maybe
does feel
that's
like a Giants
possibility.
move based on what they've done in the last 7 years. Matt Chapman checks all the boxes for how the Giants have operated.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I think that's more of the same. You know, I don't know that. Again, I don't really know that makes sense for the Giants as
Don't
currently
they have
constructed. But
their high-ranking prospects a shortstop? Am I misremembering that?
yeah, Marco Luciano, and I have
Yeah.
to imagine if they were to go get Bichette, Luciano would be the main piece moving back the other way.
Mhm.
Which, you know, I understand if you're particularly if you're a team like the Giants that does not want to spend big, you want to hold on to those guys, those top prospects that started their careers when they are cheap, when they are their most valuable. But you've got to do something. I mean, if you're looking at third base, you know, maybe it's about okay. I was actually looking at the third base options. There's not a whole lot there actually. It's kind of rough. I don't know that they can find a third base option. I think maybe, and we'll see. Like next offseason, I think the Giants are going to get yet another opportunity to potentially go big in free agency at a position of need, which is to say, when Alex Bregman hits free agency, I think that's a guy the Giants should be very interested in. But again, we're talking about 2025 now at this point. I guess long way of saying I don't really know what the 2024 Giants can do at this point. They need an impact bat, but the only real way they're going to get one is to make a trade. I think their rotation is fine as is. I know that they're in on Blake Snell, and I think that makes sense. But I also feel like if you're going to be allergic to handing out big deals to free agents, Blake Snell feels like the worst possible example of doing the opposite. You know what I mean? Like that's the riskiest choice you could make, as opposed to telling Yamamoto, put any number down you want on a piece of paper and we will give it to you. It doesn't matter what the number is. We will just give it to you. You know? And I don't know. I like I said, I think the Giants and the Red Sox are in a similar place where they've just kind of locked themselves into this weird, like 78 to 82 win purgatory because of this refusal to go or to acquire the big name guys that cost money. And I don't know how you fix that really, barring a total change in kind of organizational philosophy or being able to make a trade when at a time when it seems like teams are more and more likely to just cling to what they have and say no, because we also want to be caught. We also want to be mindful of cost.
Yeah, I don't think there's a great solution. I just think they're kind of locked into being average again, right? Like,
yeah.
And I think if you're a Giants fan, you're just kind of annoyed. And I wonder too, like, we can leave it here with the Giants. Like, how much is different if they end up not messing up the Juan Soto signing? What if Juan Soto does end up in San Francisco? How different do you think things are as we record this?
Or you mean next offseason?
Yeah, like if they had ended up with Juan Soto and won the Juan Soto, or not, excuse me, why am I saying Juan Soto? Aaron Judge. The Aaron Judge sweepstakes. Yeah. I'm losing my mind. The Aaron Judge sweepstakes.
I think that changes things. Certainly, I think the 2024 or the 2023 Giants would have been better, but I think they still run into the same problem that exists on their pitching side, which is they have one locked-in superstar, which is to say Logan Webb, and then a whole bunch of average.
Yeah.
And again, I think the thing with the Giants is it can't just be the one guy in the offseason and then you dust your hands off and go, we're done. You've got to add more than that. You've got to, and again, I know not every team is or can be the Dodgers in the way that they spend or acquire, but that's really what it takes to lift yourself up out of this place. You've got to be willing to add if you don't have a farm system that is constantly producing talent, the way that like Baltimore's or Tampa's or the Dodgers, the way that those teams do, you have to go out and spend the money. That's the only way to get yourself out of the hole. You have to do what Texas did. You just have to take the plunge. And I think there is probably the best example of what San Francisco could be is what Texas did. They gave Marcus Semien a huge deal. They gave Corey Seager a huge deal. They gave Jacob deGrom they gave huge deals all over the place. Some of those are going to age like milk left out under the sun. But you know what? It won them a World Series. And that flag flies forever. So,
yeah,
that would be my advice to the Giants. Go back in time to 2022, sign Corey Seager and Marcus Semien, and profit.
Jon Tayler. Final one here before we go. I think this is something fascinating that I wonder if this will end up happening. There was a story a few weeks back on the Mets and whether or not what the future might hold for Pete Alonso. Do you think a trade eventually is on the table? Like, we know Stearns is now running things. They're going to have more of a Milwaukee flavor, not full small market Milwaukee flavor, but the Mets, I think, are going to not just be spin, spin, spin. They're going to be a little bit more conscientious about what they do in, over the next couple of years here. Even when they dip their toes into the Yamamoto sweepstakes and obviously Ohtani as well. But I do wonder, like, he's kind of a fan favorite. Obviously, he hits a lot of dingers. That's a lot of fun. He's just a staple in New York. It's not like you're trading Ike Davis. A little bit different from back in the day. It won't hurt as much. A little bit different. But I think he's pretty lynched in there. I don't know. Like, is that something that's on your radar that it wouldn't surprise you if that's where they go down? His value's really high. They need to rebuild a little bit. What could you do?
Yeah.
Like, where are you at with Alonso and the Mets?
I can see it happening. I mean, look, it would be a horrible PR hit. And I think it's the kind of thing where there are two ways to look at that deal. One is the cold, hard, how does it, is this the right fiscal and roster building move for the New York Mets to trade away Pete Alonso, who, for as great as he is a 30-year-old right-handed first baseman who is, and this is the case with everybody, is only going to get worse as time goes on. He cannot be moved to another position. The best you can do is make him a DH. It is going to cost minimum $25 million a year, if not more, to sign him long term. I have to imagine any deal for him, he's going to want to lock himself up through his mid-30s. You're probably looking at something along the lines of minimum like 150, maybe like 200, something along those lines. That is a ton of money for a right-handed first baseman. That is not the kind of guy that ages particularly well. And again, Alonso's already on the older side. He's going to turn 30 in, just going to look this up so I have the exact date. He will turn 30. Actually, he just turned 29 about 3 weeks ago. Happy birthday, Pete. So he'll turn 30 at the end of next season. However, so there is plenty of an argument you can make that this is not necessarily the way the Mets need to go, is to sign that kind of guy long term. And I understand that. That makes sense. You want to build a more flexible roster. You're already on the hook money-wise for another, I'm just multiplying 35 by 7, which is an obscene amount of money. You're already on the hook for another $250 million to Francisco Lindor, basically till the end of time. You have another roughly $140 million to give Brandon Nimmo from here till basically the end of time. You have, and granted, some of this, those are the two really big expenditures the Mets have. For the most part, everything else is coming off the books soon. They've got 2 more years of Starling Marte, 2 more guaranteed years of Edwin Diaz, 3 more guaranteed years of Jeff McNeil at reasonable money. This isn't like the Mets are in salary hell for the remainder of time. This year their payroll is going to be enormous, in particular because of all the money that they are covering for Justin Verlander's and Max Scherzer's contracts after trading them. But this is a roster where you can make a long-term extension. It's just, is Nimmo the guy you want to give that money to? But then, like I said, there's the other side of it, which is it's either him or Lindor is the most popular guy on this team. He is the heart and soul of that team in so many ways. And more importantly than that, if you're Steve Cohen, what does it say to Mets fans? What message does it send to them if you've come in initially saying, we're going to spend like crazy, we're going to win the back pages, we're going to be the best team in New York, we're going to be an immediate contender, to 2 years later going, we're trading the most popular guy on the team because he might be too expensive for me, a literal billionaire. It's the kind of stuff that you don't really recover from, especially given the history of this franchise and especially given what this fan base is used to.
It's one thing if you won. Like, if they'd gotten a ring in the last 2 years, I don't think it hurts as much. I think if you build that cachet over years, I don't think the timing's going to be right over the next couple of years for that kind of move.
No, and especially the way you look at it too, like, this is not a team that's going to be good, I think, in 2024. I don't think they're going to be bad. I don't think they're going to be as bad as they were last year. But this is also not a team where you're looking at their roster going, 95 wins, plan up, baby.
I don't think they planned for that to be the case too.
No, and it's very clear that a lot of what Cohen was doing last offseason was essentially, well, one was he's a very rich man who spends very stupidly. and just decided that a fun thing to do would be to give like Justin Verlander or Max Scherzer $1 billion, which is not a terrible idea, just for the record, but is a particular mindset for a particular kind of Mark Cuban-esque billionaire. But it also is a sign of just how little else the Mets had, that they had to give that money to Verlander and Scherzer, because there's really, again, look at this roster right now. This rotation right now is Kodai Senga, Jose Quintana, Luis Severino, Adrian Hauser, Tyler McGill. That is flat out awful.
Yeah.
This lineup right now, Nimmo, McNeil, Lindor, Alonso, great. Starling Marte, DJ Stewart, Francisco Alvarez, Brett Baty, Tyrone Taylor, not so great. Like, this is not a good team. Just straight up, it is not a good team. And that's not even getting into a really bad bullpen beyond Edwin Diaz, who is coming off a major knee injury. Like, and all the worse too by, they've lost now 2 guys probably for the entirety of next season, definitely in Ronnie Mauricio, potentially in David Peterson, helpful guys. And you look at this farm system, it's not a bad one, particularly now that they added Luis Angel Acuna and Drew Gilbert, your boy, who I'm legally obligated to mention here. But not an overall very strong farm system. If you look at our farm system rankings from the end of last season, have not been updated. Again, our Fangraphs farm system rankings updated at the end of last season. The Mets were 7th in our estimation, but a lot of that was adding Acuna and Gilbert. Beyond those 2 guys, it's a lot of lottery tickets. It's not guys who are ready to help you right now. So I think you're right with what you said. Like, if this were a team coming out of a better position, if they'd won recently, or if if there were some indication too that it's like, boy, like if this were the NFL or the NBA, they're like, we're in cap hell and we've just got to make some ugly choices to get out of it. But that's not the case. You can't have a billionaire owner, the richest man in the sport, come in and then 2 years later be cutting costs like that. It is just such an awful look. So, I mean, look, would I be surprised? Not necessarily, no, because I don't know that a long-term commitment to Pete Alonso is really in the Mets' best interest. But would I think it's a good move? Well, obviously depends on what they get in exchange. But just speaking purely from a PR level, from a optics level, it's awful. And I think that is probably the thing that moves the needle most for Steve Cohen is, what is this going to look like for me optics wise? How is this going to paint me as an owner if the biggest move I make after my team imploded in hideous fashion last season is, now we're getting rid of the guy everyone likes. We're getting rid of the best hitter on this team. So long. Too bad. Well, Lindor is arguably a better hitter, but I don't know. I can see it, but I think everyone involved would have a really hard time stomaching it. And I don't know which wins out at the end of the day.
I think he stays. I don't think he moves anytime soon, but I do think we're going to have the rumors of like, teams are calling about Peter Alonso this year.
I think the rumors are already out there, and I think if the Mets are in a similar position this summer as they were last summer, I think more likely than not he will get moved at the deadline, because I think it's easier to sell it at that point as, hey, it's his last season under contract. He can always come back as a free agent. We've got to try to get better for the future. Blah 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 blah.
Does he make more? Does he get a bigger return than Matt Olson?
No, hell no, absolutely not. No way, no, because Olson, at the very least, was under cheaper contract.
Yeah.
And was clearly, and look, I guess maybe, and I don't necessarily know how I don't think Matt Olson and Pete Alonso necessarily compare as a player to player level, but let's just use Matt Olson's contract, I guess, as a starting point. His extension with the Braves, and also keeping in mind that Atlanta has a secret mind control device that they use to get these guys to sign below market extensions for reasons no one understands. 8 years and $168 million. To cover the 2022 through 2029 seasons with a team option for 2030 that is valued at $20 million. So that is a steady, he was paid $15 million the first year of that deal, $21 million last season, and then a steady 22 million that'll be paid out over the next 6 seasons. So you call that 6 times 22 is 6 years, 132 million. I think at the minimum, that's Alonso's floor for the next 6 years is $125 million. Is Steve Cohen willing to pay that for a lesser hitter who also hits right-handed? I don't know that I would do it, but I also am not Steve Cohen. I mean, I to a certain degree, I wish I were. It'd be nice to have $13 billion, but that's a really tough thing to ask. And I also think, again, that is going to be Alonso's floor. I think he's realistically going to be seeking $150 million or more. I don't see him being a guy who just says, yeah, just give me Matt Olson's deal. I don't care. I think he's going to ask for more than that. And I think it's going to be pretty hard for him to argue otherwise when he can say, I hit 46 home runs in 2023. I am a guaranteed 35 home run a year power threat. I am popular and likable and media savvy, you know? I fit the city of New York, which is a very difficult thing. You know, I have such a hard time seeing him taking less than what Olsen is getting over the next 6 years, and understandably so. I don't see him taking that much more necessarily. I don't think any team is going to make him an offer of more than like $180 million over 6 years. But I also don't think he's going to take anything less than 125, 130 to stay. I don't know that there's really going to be a hometown discount, nor do I think there should be, given, again, Steve Cohen is worth $13 billion.
That's a great way of ending it, Jon Tayler.
Well, thank you. I think so myself. I think so too.
Like, hey, that's a good way. Sometimes you just stumble into a good ending to a pod.
So yeah, it is the particular alchemy and magic of podcasting.
Absolutely. We don't have because it's not Fangraphs anymore. I don't have anything to plug here. We don't have anything to plug as we wrap up on this first post Fangraphs pod for you.
Yeah, although my little thing still says Fangraphs.
I noticed that at the beginning of the show, and I forgot to take it off. I thought I did it last week, and I didn't want to say anything because I was like, I'm kind of embarrassed, and I was already behind tonight, and I was like, I probably should, but it's okay.
It's okay. I like that the people listening to this have no idea what we're talking about, but I have a little Fangraphs chyron underneath my name.
Well, a lot of people watch this. We have over 1,000 in the last 2 days since I posted the last week's episode.
Oh, wow. Look at us. Yeah. Getting viewers.
No, we're doing that. Look, our Ohtani in the hot stove is hot, Jon Tayler.
Well, it's not hot right now, although I prefer it not being hot during the holidays. Here's what should have been my take. MLB should, did I say this last week? MLB should do like the NHL does and institute a roster freeze during the holidays. No transactions, no additions, no nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, let us breathe. Let us baseball people breathe for even just one single week. Get, like, to quote Boromir in the Fellowship of the Ring, give them a moment for pity's sake. Like,
well, not
let us have our
but
space.
Also sports. Like, look, I host a sports podcast each and every day. I like sports, more at 11, but you know, when I'm with my family and we're hanging out, like I had this desire, like I'm having to go watch. I want to watch the NBA stuff on Christmas Day, and I'm like, I wish I didn't have that option. You know what I mean? Like, I wish we all collectively were like, let's not do this. Like,
yeah, let's just take time off.
Yeah, let's not do it. Like, let's not get the option, because I don't like the option where I'm like, I want to know. Like, you know what I mean? It's just very annoying when you have things that you're like, I really want to prioritize this, but your brain, because you do this for a living and everything, like, it's just I need. You're just drawn to the den to go check in on stuff, and you're like, I just. Don't give me the option to just stop. Let these people be.
Just stop. Yeah, let's give us all a breather.
Yeah, 100%. Jon Tayler, always a pleasure, and I'll talk to you next week.
Sounds good.